Men, and I use the term loosely, we're going to plunge right into the business of the day. You notice, it's leaning, I'm leaning. This is I'm going to incorporate this tech tip into the intro today. I'm working on a primary. Of course, you drain the fluid out of it, and you know how it continues to drip for hours and hours and hours. And that is detrimental to putting a gasket on and sealing up the primary cover. So what I do is I lean the bike the other way, and that residual oil that's in there is going to flow the other direction so that it won't continuously try to drip out while I'm applying my gasket sealer. So first tip of the day in the intro, that's efficiency, man. But anyway, fourth day, today's Thursday, owner's coming on, Monday coming up. I got to get the primary back together again, get it sealed up, let it cure for a while, and put oil back in there. And then I'm going to work on a tack cable. I put the clutch together last night, and I decided to take it apart again this morning. Don't worry, Rob. I'm not going to charge you twice, just one time. I'm going to take it apart because I rounded up some of the spacers. This is one of the clutches without the spacers. And I did the 11/32 adjustment on the, the releasing disc and the last clutch plate and all that. Pain in the ass. Much easier to use the spacers. So I'm going to take the clutch apart and drill holes in the steel clutch plate to accommodate the spacers, and we'll put the spacers in it and upgrade the clutch form. Should work good. Anyway, that's what's on order for today. I don't think I'm going to show you taking the clutch out. You guys have seen me take clutches out before if you watch the videos. I might show you the operation for putting the clutch spacers in there or drilling a hole for it. You know, back in the olden days, if you went to Harley dealer and you bought clutch plates after, and I was at 73, 74, whenever they started using the spacers, if you went to a Harley dealer and you bought clutch plates, they would give you the clutch plates with the bigger hole, the slot in them to accommodate the spacers, and then they would sell you the upgrade kit. So all the upgrade kit was to put the spacers on the new steel discs with the the oval holes in them. And I might show you one of those. I might have one laying around. I might even have a set of good steel discs that I won't have to drill. I'm going to go look in my junk for that. But anyway, first order of business, get the clutch straightened away, and I'll keep you posted. I want to drive this today. I want to sit my ass on it and drive it. I think it's possible. All right, I drilled these already, and they weren't sliding freely on the spacers. So I did have, I rounded up an old stock slotted one, and I measured the holes. And these holes are a little too small, so I went up one more fractional size, so this drill matches the width of these holes over here. In order to keep the alignment precise, I had an old clutch hub, and I just stacked them up this time on the old clutch hub. The clutch hub has a lip on the bottom, so when it sets on the drill press, it's not quite flat. So I got a couple of old discs out of my pile, and these are just spacers to keep the stack level. So let's re-drill it. Yeah, that's going to be much better. Yeah. I've got more precise alignment and a little bit bigger hole. Yeah, very nice. I'm happy with that. That's going to work good this time. I know, you can't believe it. I've got more shit to say about clutches. These have been problematic, Sportster clutches, over the years. Some people bitch about them. But if you know a few things, they're easier to deal with. This clutch was converted just now from the early style nose spacer one to the later style spacer one. The trouble with the early style nose spacer one is when you tighten these nuts down to adjust the distance between the last plate and the top of this disc, there's nothing for the nut to seat against except the spring pressure on this plate. Normally, when you tighten a nut and bolt, you're stretching the bolt a little bit, and that stretch puts a load on whatever the bolt is screwed into or the nut, as the case may be. Well, with not stretching anything because there's no spacer to push against, the nut, it's not tight. I mean, yes, it's self-locking, but this thing is free to float. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen these things and said, what in the does that possibly do? These things, on the bikes that don't have spacers, put a little pressure on the nut and they lock it in place so that once you get it adjusted, theoretically, it can't move out on you because you've got it pinched in here. So that's what these things are for. When you have the spacers installed, you no longer need these, and you no longer need these. Now, I could have cut these off and the bike will be just fine. When I build my own bikes and I do this conversion on them, I cut these off and the bike don't need them. You only need these if you don't have the spacers. The other thing I want to say about spacers is this. When you get the spacers installed and you put the nut on, you don't want to tighten the nut so tight that you deform the spacer. The spacers are 1.530 inches long. If you mash the nut down on them, they're no longer 1.530 inches long. There's some other number less than that. And the clutch let's see, you're making the spacers shorter, so the clutch will drag a little bit more because it needs a certain amount of space in there. Now, as your clutch wears and you want to take up for that wear, Harley used to sell, but they probably don't sell anymore, shorter spacers. So you can make the spacers shorter to compensate for wear in the clutch. So on the ones without the spacers, what do you do when the clutch wears? Well, you take the cover off and you adjust the distance between the outer surface of the releasing disc and the first plate. And, then you put your clips back on and you're good to go again. Anyway, my dissertation on spacers and the nuts and the clippy safety doodads you don't need anymore. All right, should you decide to do this mod to your early Ironhead no spacer clutch, be aware of this. There is an upset on the base of the stud where Harley crimps the stud into the plate. This upset will keep the stud from bottoming on the plate. You see, I could get the end of a screwdriver in there. It's kind of a big upset. So what you need to do, or at least what I do, is, there we go, I chamfer the spacer so that the upset falls into the spacer and the stud and the spacer correctly mate together. Just a word to the wise, if you're attempting this mod, one of the things you need to look out for. I try to check everything I could think of, and I didn't notice this at first. Well, when I got done putting the clutch together, I measured it because you should be very, very close to that 11/32 number. And some of these were off. And I did a little investigating, and this is what I found. Check everything when you're working on something like this, because you never can tell what might go wrong. Anyway, word to the wise, check everything. All right, all of this is buttoned up. Theoretically, when you put the spacers in and you go back and measure the distance from the top of the releasing disc to the first, okay, everything here is buttoned up. Theoretically, when you measure the distance from the top of the releasing disc to the first clutch plate, you should be at 11/30 seconds, which is the dimension in the book for how to adjust it if there are no spacers. So I got a bunch of spacers in there. They're all the 1.530 plus or minus a couple of thou. And I measured this distance over here. And I'm actually coming up with 4, 8, 9, 10, 30 seconds. So this is a little closer than the book would have you believe it should be. Nonetheless, I'm going to put it together. I think it's going to work fine. Okay, one other thing I want to mention about clutches, Harley clutches, because you may or you may not run into it. I worked on at least one bike where the guy had trouble getting the clutch to release. So, of course, I took it all apart, checked everything out. Really didn't see anything too much wrong with it. But what I discovered was that the releasing disc, when it was being pushed in, was hitting the last clutch disc, preventing full travel on the releasing disc. So what I did on his bike and what I do on subsequent bikes is I take the releasing disc, I put it in the lathe, and I machine about 30 or 40 thou off of the edge over here so that if need be, this disc can now go below the surface of the last plate and you could get a little extra travel on it. Did this bike need that? Probably not. But just in case, it's one less thing that could cause you a problem. So with that, this is done. I got to clean up the mess around here, put the cover on, and let the sealant cure, and I'll be back later, much later, hopefully when it goes outside to drive for the first time. Oh, let me show you one more thing as long as I'm down here rooting around. I've been having trouble with the starter solenoid dropping out, and the starter would spin, but it wouldn't turn the motor over. And it could be this. These points are kind of corroded. There's rust on the core and the magnet in here, so I don't know how well this is actually working. If I were to push this right now, the starter would, while the solenoid would kick out, the starter would engage, and the engine would try to rotate. The reason I don't push it right now, because I kind of want to try that, is this is unsupported on the primary side, so it's going to jam up in there and probably break something, so I don't want to do it. So when I get this outside and try to start it, I may just hold this in with my finger because this may be the problem. The magnet may be weak, there may be corrosion in the windings in here. There's plenty of corrosion on the outside, so yeah, this could be the root of the problem right here. New one's supposed to be here. Oh God, I hope Saturday, like the eBay guys said it was going to be, but I'll believe it when I see it. But anyway, the alternate starters, just jam that in there with your finger. And the broken ground wire on the voltage regulator that seemingly fixed the generator has been replaced. And a lot of times on something like this, I run redundant grounds. There's two 16-gauge wires over here. One 16-gauge wire probably would have been sufficient. But, you're going down the road, one of them breaks. Well, no, there's a backup there already. Anyway, I'll be back much, much later when I shove this thing outside, hopefully to get it running. And this is why these projects always take longer than you think they're going to take. Right here is a dent in the cover. And this dent was caused because somebody tightened the primary cover up against the tail on the rear brake return spring. And there's a gouge in there, and it just exactly matches that, that spring wire that goes through here. And of course, it was goobered up with JB weld, I assume, or some other epoxy, which of course didn't fix anything. So we're going to put a little bead of weld on it, probably from about here to about here, and then we got to dress it all flat. So, you know, I should be bolting this cover on by now, but no, we're going to be dicking around with welding it. So yeah, stuff always takes a little longer, or sometimes a lot longer than you think it would or should. The gouge used to be here. Ran a nice little bead on top of it, knocked it off with a coarse file. And on a lot of these case half kind of things and primary kind of things, this is what I like to do. I've got this nice flat file, and I put just a, just any old screw in there, and that gives it something to pivot on. So I kind of draw file over it, and because the file is laying flat on this side of the case and it's a flat file, it gives me a good surface. You know, and the temptation might be to take big long strokes, but you want to keep it over the damage, over the weld, because you don't want to remove this other metal. You just want to remove the metal in the repaired part. This side of the weld is blended in. This has got a little ways to go. One side is coarse, one side is fine. Flipping it over to the fine side. And it's nicely blended all the way across. So this gives this owner the best chance for a leak-free joint here. The primary cover is on. Did that off camera. I don't know, you guys have seen me put those on before probably. Nothing special about it. I do use the black, ultra black, Permatex Ultra Black RTV. That stuff is the, if you got to use silicone, and I don't use silicone generally speaking anywhere except the primary because they're difficult to seal. But anyway, silicone, Permatex Ultra Black is what I use. That little gouge that I welded on the primary cover was from a guy tightening the primary cover with this little spring, end of that spring in the way. Okay, so that's where that came from. So yeah, make sure you got that out of the way if you're going to tighten the primary cover up. And I'm going to give you one tip over here that is worth the price of admission today. This is a 1/4 inch extension with a deep well socket on it, and this is the easiest way to do these springs. Hook it over the end of the hook, and then you just lift and pick it up and put it on. It doesn't get any easier than that, let me tell you. So yeah, that's the primary. Oh, the instructions for this stuff says to let it dry, cure 24 hours. I wanted to try to drive this today, but you know, by the time I welded it and took care of the stuff with the clutch, it got to be late this afternoon, and I'm going to let this cure overnight. I'm probably not going to let it cure 24 hours, but I'm going to let it cure overnight. I don't want to, you know, this owner came from 700 miles away, and I want to give him the best chance of not having a leaky primary. So I'm going to wait till tomorrow until I try to drive it. I'll do a clutch adjustment while I'm rooting around down here. You want to have slack in the cable. Slack it up as far as it'll go. Down here, you want to break the jam nut loose. And this is how I do it. Spark plug socket and a 3/4 inch wrench. Break the jam nut loose. I want to get it so that it's not going to interfere with turning the center adjusting screw at all. So I back the jam nut all the way out, take the adjusting screw and start turning it in. You're going to feel it like right here, it's starting to pick up pick up resistance. So I'm beginning to move the releasing disc, and I should be able to get at least 2 full turns out of this screw before it bottoms out. So that's a half, that's 1, that's 1.5, that's 2, 2.5. Yeah, okay, so we got, okay, this is bottomed out all the way. And then what you do is this, you go back up here to the adjuster, and you take all of the slack out of the adjuster. The book says all of the slack. And people say, I can't get my clutch adjusted. And I say, do exactly what it says in the manual. This is what the manual tells you to do. It says take all the slack out. And when the manual says all the slack, I do believe they mean all the slack. So, you could finger turn this thing out, and you feel the lever, and yeah, that's got all the slack out of it. Then you tighten down this jam nut over here. And Harley just kills me, because this really is they designed this thing, and you really can't get a wrench on the adjuster nut easily. I mean, you sort of can while it's out all the way. And I should be able to turn this with my fingers. And it's stiff. Okay, it's loosening up. Anyway, you take all the slack out over here. Once you got all the slack out of the cable, then you could tighten down the adjuster nut. And I use this wrench here. And it's it's a piece of crap. What is this? Performance tool. I'm sure it was made in China. India. This is made in India. But I ground this as thin as I could grind it and cut a slot in it. So the slot fits over the cable adjuster, and it's ground thin because there's very little room between the nut and the primary cover. But then tighten that up, and that should be good to go. Then you go back over here, and you back out that adjuster screw you just screwed all the way in until it starts to go slack. Okay, and right now the pressure's off it, it's gone slack. And then you screw it in until you just start to contact, until you get a little resistance, and it's just starting to contact the releasing disc. And I should be able to squeeze the lever. Play with it a little bit more. And the book says you leave about 1/8 of an inch of free play in the lever. And I got maybe 1/8 of an inch, maybe not quite. So now the trick of it is you want to grab the slot on the screw so it doesn't move, and then tighten the jam nut down. And that's it. This clutch should be adjusted. We'll find out when I drive it tomorrow how good I did, but that should do it. I got here clamped down in the bed of the lathe, of course, the primary inspection plug, and the slot seems unusually shallow and short, and I damn near couldn't get it out of the primary case. So we're going to make the slot a little deeper and a little wider, and I'm just doing it by eyeball. Yeah, that'll work. We're going to call that good to go. All right, we're wrapping today's video up. Didn't do a real lot today. Well, I put the clutch back together again. I'm not driving the bike because I seal the primary up with, I seal it up with this stuff. Ultra black gasket maker oil resistant. This stuff is meant for transmissions and gearboxes. You know, I bitch about silicone all the time, but I do use it on primaries because primaries sometimes are a bitch to get sealed up. And I'm not as concerned about it because it's not connected to the engine and it's not going to get sucked through an oil pump gear. The transmission gears, if a piece of this breaks off, are considerably beefier than an oil pump gear. And I'm just not as worried about it. You know, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and this is a good sealant, and it seals up. Primary covers good. I'm going to bitch about some stuff now. Previous repair, somebody did, I don't know who. This was the ground wire to the voltage regulator that I think is why the generator wasn't working. You know, people insist on using these crappy crimp-on terminals. And, you know, if you got to use something like this, at least use one the right size. This is for, I believe, 10 and 12 gauge wire. And, of course, you've got a 16 or a 14 gauge wire. So this is way too big for this. So, you know, and then, of course, it was probably crimped with one of these. And yeah, I know everybody uses them, but you know, you can't, just the way they're designed, you can't possibly squeeze this tight enough to get a good connection. It just ain't there. And I've done a video or two on crimps. I use these aircraft quality ones, which are tremendously expensive, but on the other hand, if you get on Amazon, you start looking around at wire crimpers, there are all kinds of ratcheting wire crimpers that do a much better job than these that are very affordable. So, you know, you're the guy who's going to be stuck at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere when a wire falls out. So don't use these. Get yourself some decent crimpers if you're going to be working on wiring. And just FYI, this is an aircraft quality mil-spec wire crimp. Several things differentiate it from these piece of shit ones. One of the things that differentiates it is the barrel is solid. On these, you know, they're stamped out of a piece of whatever and folded over, so there's a seam down the middle, which is the spot where, you know, the wire's just going to fall out of there, okay? These are one piece. I have seen them, I know you really can't tell, but they're stamped out of something too, and they're folded together, and I don't know, they're welded, they're soldered, they're silver soldered, they're brazed or something. So the barrel is one piece, and it doesn't give avenue for the wire to escape. And then outside the barrel of the connector is another thin barrel, and outside of that, of course, is the plastic. And these guys are designed to crimp in 2 stages. The crimp up here is tight on the wire. The part of the crimp back here is a little looser, and this is designed to grab the insulation of the wire. And the effect of it is to help support the wire in the crimp so that there's not a vibration stress point right where the wire goes in and out of the crimp. So, you know, if you're going to work on wiring, get yourself a decent crimper and use decent crimps. These are junk. And I'm going to bitch some more. This bike had a bunch of these on them, and you've seen these. Let's open this one up. Let's see if I can figure out. Yeah, there it is. You guys know these. These are the ones where you have perhaps a straight piece of wire and you want to add another wire to the circuit. You press the wire into this fork and the other wire into this fork and squeeze it together, maybe with a pair of pliers. They make a reasonably good connection. However, you know, one of the goals when you're working on wiring is to never nick the conductor, because if you nick the conductor, that then becomes a stress riser, and the wire will vibrate and break at that point. So, you know, by design, these are crappy, okay? Plus, they're, water ingress, they corrode. I mean, these are just junk. The only time I would consider these suitable is if you are broken down in the parking lot of a Walmart at 2 a.m. Strictly temporary to get you home, not something to be used as a permanent fix for anything. And like I say, I cut several of these out of this bike and replaced it with the aircraft type splices. And the aircraft type splices, the ones I happen to be using, are not particularly weather resistant, but they're more weather resistant than this is, that's for sure. So once again, junk. I regard this as a temporary repair only for emergency use. I'm reasonably confident that the bike will be good to go. Gonna let that sealant cure overnight and take it out, fire it up tomorrow. The generator started working. Off camera, I pulled the tack cable out. I just bring it over to the parts washer and flush washer fluid through it, and then lube it up with grease real good. So I think the howling tack cable is going to be fixed, and I think the starter is going to be fixed. The more I think about it, the more I think it's that questionable relay. Like I said, that's that relay that was all rusty. I sanded the points off a little bit. I think that might be why the solenoid was dropping out and the starter was just spinning. When I had the primary cover off to look at the clutch, the parts in there all looking. I mean, hell, the thing's only got 3,600 miles on it. So, the Bendix gear wasn't chewed up. The ring gear wasn't chewed up. Stuff all looked almost brand new in there. So tomorrow we will definitely, all I'm going to do tomorrow is take it outside and fire it up. So, put some oil in it. I got to put oil back in the trans. We'll take care of that tomorrow. So for tonight, I am out of here. I got to go figure out what this guy's bill is going to be. And we'll see you in the morning. And hopefully it'll be a quick, easy video. And that might be the end of this series. Y'all take it easy. Thanks for watching. Bye. Men, if you like this channel and this content, the single most important thing you could do to help grow this channel is to hit the subscribe button. I also have new design coffee cups and stickers available. I like the old coffee cups, but I like these new ones even more. Links are included in the description down below. And for those of you who really want to go the extra mile, you could join me on Patreon. Link is also included in the description down below. And to all of you who have watched these videos, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you very much. I really, really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Bye.